It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Well, hello there. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, as always, Douglas Coleman. How are ya? If you're a Beatles fan, like I am, then this upcoming interview is a must-listen. My guest is Denny Somach. And Denny was a radio personality, a music producer. He also was one of the most successful independent producers of syndicated and network rock radio programming in the United States. He's interviewed basically anyone who's anyone. And he's got a new book out now called A Walk Down Abbey Road. Now, I know what you're thinking, oh God, another Beatles book. But this one is unique because it's full of interviews that he has done over the years and has now compiled into his book. People like Sting and Billy Joel and Steven Tyler, Brian Wilson, Elton John, just to name a few. Plus there's interviews with all four Beatles. He also worked with Scott Mooney, who was a legendary disc jockey in New York back in the 70s, who had many interviews with John Lennon. And the foreword of the book has been written by none other than Mickey Dolenz and the Monkees. So please check out this book. It's a great book. Just go to DennySomach.com. That's DennySomach.com. And you can check it out there, and I'm sure there's links to where you can buy it. According to Denny, the hard copy may be a bit delayed due to the virus situation, but the ebook is out and available. If you can't wait for the hard copy or don't want to wait, then go grab an ebook copy. Coming up in the second half of the show, we've got Brady Novotny. Brady is a musician and an excellent guitar player. He's got a new album out called Passions Collide, and we're going to listen to two of the tracks from that album. Brady's music is very unique, and it's difficult to sort of stick it into one particular genre. It's kind of a mix of many things, shredding rock guitar along with flamenco and other sounds. It's not music that is simplistic. I think that would be the wrong word to use to describe it. It's complex, but it's also listenable. It's not so far out there that you can't understand it. It's good stuff. Anyways, check out his website at bradynovotny.com. It's spelled BradyNovotny. And pick up his album, Passions Collide. So lots to get to. Don't go away.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps, record producer. This is my story about Elton John, working with him in those early years, going back to 1967 at Dick James, all the amazing tours, those first recordings, going through to Rocket Records. And it's an amazing story about his incredible rise to stardom and my part in that. So look forward to taking you on that journey. So here we go. Yeah, and to order this great audio CD, please just email me at stuartepps@talk21.com. That's Stuart, Stuart, Epps, EPPS, at talk, TALK, 21 in figures.com. Stuart Epps at talk21.com. Email me and I'll give you all the details for buying this brilliant audio disc. Thank you. Bye.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Hurry, Bullwinkle! The show's about to start!
I'm coming as fast as I can.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Ooh, don't know my own strength.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Denny Somach. Hey, Denny, how are you?
I'm okay, Douglas. How are you today?
Oh, doing pretty well. All things considered. I got to ask the obligatory question that I've been asking all my guests for the past few weeks. How are you faring with the virus situation?
Well, I'm doing okay. The only thing is I have this new book out, and my book tour got canceled, obviously, so I have to do everything remotely. But you know what? So far, it's been a blast.
So you're staying at home then, yeah?
Staying at home, doing everything from here, and it's a little different, but what else can I say?
Well, at least you're healthy, though, right?
Yes.
Before we talk about your book, if you wouldn't mind, just give us a little bit of your background, because reading through your bio looks like you've worked with quite a few very famous musicians and artists, and your work in radio. Just tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll go for the book.
Okay. Well, I started out in radio. I was a disc jockey, major market radio station. This was in the 80s. And from there, I went and started producing syndicated radio shows, the kind of interview shows where, you hear the artists talk and you play music. They used to usually run on Sunday nights at radio station. I'm trying to think of our affiliate out where you are. But it'll come to me. Anyway, I did that for quite some time. I eventually got involved in some other things. I produced the first nationally syndicated weekly Beatles show.
Wow.
With a well-known disc jockey out of New York named Scott Muni, who was actually one of the DJs in America that met the Beatles in '64. And we did a weekly Beatles show. And I used to have all these guests on, which is how I collected all these Beatle interviews, which we'll get to in a minute. I've also been involved in doing some record production. I'm the executive producer of an album by Eric Johnson called A.V.A. Musicom, which won a Grammy and is a platinum-selling album. I've worked with Johnny Winter. I've worked with Dave Mason. Worked with Alan Parsons. Let's see what else. But basically, my main thing is doing these radio shows and doing these interviews. And after 30 plus years, I realized, I have more interviews than anybody about the Beatles. And since I only used little excerpts, and people were always saying, "Hey, what about the rest of the interviews?" So I figured, what? I'm going to put a book together and put the best of the interviews. And that's how the book came about. It's called A Walk Down Abbey Road. And it's basically everybody from Billy Joel to Elton John to the Isley Brothers talking about how the Beatles had an impact on them or any interaction they had with the Beatles. And the stories are they're just, they go from so many different, they come from so many different places that it was just a really fun project to do. And then when I was finishing the book up, I happened to run into Mickey Dolenz and the Monkees, and I told him about it because he was interviewed for the book. And he said, "Hey, can I write the foreword?" So I said, "Sure, go ahead." So that's how Mickey Dolenz wrote the foreword to the book. And that's what I'm doing. I still do a lot of production, some TV. Right now I'm working on a documentary. And probably I had a best-selling book out before this. A couple of years ago, I did a book on Led Zeppelin called Get the Lead Out, How Led Zeppelin Became the Biggest Band in the World. So this is my follow-up book.
It says A Walk Down Abbey Road also contains interviews with all four Beatles. So How long ago did you do John Lennon? I mean, that must have been before 1980,
well,
obviously,
no,
right?
I didn't do the John Lennon interview. That's the only one that I did not personally do, and for obvious reasons. I didn't get to him before 1980. But all the others I did do.
Okay.
But I do know Yoko very well, and I've been up to the Dakota many, many times, and I've interviewed her many, many times. So the John Lennon interview came from John Lennon, who was living in New York at the time, and knew Scott Muni, who was on the premier album rock station, WNEW-FM. In February of 75, he just came in off the street and said, "Can I see Scott? I've got this new album, the test pressing. It's coming out next week. It's called the Rock and Roll Album, and I wanted Scott to hear it." And Scott said, "Okay, sit down. You're going on the air with me. We're going to play every track, and you're going to talk." And that's where that interview came from.
Oh, okay, great. Nice story. How was Yoko? I interviewed a guy named David Bedford. I don't know if you know who he is. No,
I don't.
He runs the official Beatles tour in Liverpool.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm aware of that.
And he's written, I don't know, a dozen books on the Beatles. He spoke very highly of Yoko because he worked with her on several occasions, and she gave money to fix up the school, the elementary school that John went to.
Right.
And so he talked about her.
I've had a very good relationship with her. I didn't find her to be necessarily the way that many people have portrayed her. She's always been good to me. I've always had pleasant memories and of my time spent with her. And I've been up to the Dakota. I was at a party. She had a major party for John and Sean in the 80s, and I went to that, and that was pretty amazing. And like I said, I find her to be a fascinating person. And it's a shame that she's gotten some bad press over the years. Believe me, she had nothing to do with breaking up the Beatles. And in fact, there are some things about her that I think people don't know. And that is that she had a lot of input in the writing of John's song Imagine. But she was not allowed to get a writing credit on it.
I read that.
Most people don't know that.
I read that. In fact, I read something that John said he even felt bad that he didn't give her credit for it, or he wasn't allowed. But he said that she definitely was influential, particularly with the lyrics, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I can tell you, it's not that John didn't give her credit. It's the publishers, John's publishers. He said, well, Yoko wrote this with me, so she's going to get half the publishing. And they said, no. We know that's a trick. You just want to take half your publishing back and give it to your wife. We won't allow that. So that's how that came about.
Oh, I see. Why are the Beatles, do you think? What makes them so unique? I mean, they seem to be the only band in the world that has been dissected to the degree that they have been. What made them so different from everybody else?
Well, I think it's the fact that first of all, they were a great band. They wrote great music. They were really, I mean, except for Buddy Holly, who came out, in the late 50s, they were really the first major group to come out where they played their own instruments, wrote their own songs, dressed in matching outfits, had a real manager. They were one of the first to do that, and they influenced so many other people, which comes out in the book, like people like Billy Joel and Joe Walsh and other people say, when I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, I immediately knew that's what I want to do. I can't believe it. Here's a group of guys who write their own songs, play their own music. Wow, that's what I want to do. So that's one part of it. And the other part of it is they are still around today, and they have, I like to use this phrase, the Beatles have been able to do something that no other group has been able to do, and that is become bigger than the Beatles. And what I mean by that is they are the first real group to become cross-generational, meaning that, there are Elvis fans, but Elvis did not cross over generationally. Neither did Frank Sinatra, though there are people from our generation that like Elvis and like Sinatra. You know what I'm saying? If the Beatles were still playing concerts today, or if you use the Rolling Stones as a model, the audience would be everyone from 17 years old to 75.
Right.
And you wouldn't have seen that in an Elvis show or a Sinatra show. So they've become cross-generational. I think that's the key. And the fact that they were great. I'll tell you a little interesting story, because I've also interviewed, although I didn't really include many of them in the book, I have interviewed just about every author that wrote a major book about the Beatles. So a lot of the things that I'm telling you is true from these people. And one of the authors, I don't remember which one it was, said to me once that, there's three things in the world that you can never have enough books on, that people can always write a book on. And those three things are Marilyn Monroe, the Titanic, and the Beatles. And I think that that's absolutely correct.
Which of the Beatles biographies do you like? Do you think is your favorite, if you have one?
Yeah, I think Shout by Philip Norman, and the book The Beatles by Mark Spitz. Those are the two that I think were the best. I like to tell people, most of the people that have written these Beatle books never had any contact with any of them. Some of them weren't even alive when the Beatles came out. And that's the perspective that I brought to this book, is that I grew up with them, and I actually got to work with and meet the three of them. And in fact, with like Ringo and Paul, it was on more than one occasion. And I just felt that I had a pretty unique perspective, because I said to myself, "Oh, does the world need another Beatle book?" And then I remembered what that guy told me, and I remembered that so many of the books that I've read about the Beatles are just terrible. So, not to toot my own horn, but I just think I had a better perspective.
Tell me a little bit about the interview you did with Paul and Ringo. Was that together?
No. Ringo I did a couple of times. I did. Look, every interview with Ringo is exciting, because you never know what's going to come out. So I don't know what I could tell you. I will tell you an interesting thing. I brought Ringo on one of the interviews I did. I happened to have with me, and I brought along to show him, I had a list of all the front pages from the newspapers in America from the 1964 Beatles tour, where they got reviewed in each city. And I showed it to him, and he had never seen it, because, he was too busy being a Beatle at the time. It's not like they went and got the newspaper the next day, and there's so much stuff out there on the Beatles, but this was all like in one folder. The front page of the New York Post, the front page of the LA Times, the front page of every paper where the Beatles played and what the reviews were. And he got a kick out of that. So I thought that was kind of cool. Ringo got excited about something like that.
Yeah.
With Paul, I'll tell you a great story. One of the times I interviewed Paul was in 1984, and he was doing interviews in New York at the Plaza Hotel, which is where they stayed. And actually, I came in with Scott Muni because we were working on the radio show, and Paul saw us, and he goes, "Oh, look, this is interview day, but," he says, "why don't you guys wait till the end, because I can give you more time. I have to follow what my publicist said, and everybody's getting 10 or 15 minutes, but this way I can give you, a half hour, whatever you need." So we waited until everybody else was done, and then we did our interview, and then I waited until the end of the interview, and I didn't realize it till the day before we were going to do it, that the date, and I don't remember off the top of my head, it was late August, early September of 84, and I realized it was the 15th anniversary of the whole Paul is dead. Do you remember that whole controversy?
Yeah.
So it was on that day 15 years ago. So I figured, you know what? I'm going to see what he has to say, but I'll wait till the interview's over in case he gets annoyed. And at the end of the interview, I said, "Paul, not that you would necessarily know this, but do you have any idea what today represents, what today is?" Of course, he looked at me and he goes, "Well, no, what is it?" I said, "Today's the 15th anniversary of your death." And he just looked at me and he smiled and he said, "Well, as you can see, I'm still here."
Who started that whole thing? Do you know?
Yeah, that was started. Yeah, I do. I studied that extensively. It was a disc jockey in Detroit, Michigan, that first some listener called in and said to him, "Hey, I think Paul McCartney's dead. There's this rumor going around, and there's clues on the album." And the Abbey Road album had just come out, and I forget off the top of my head. Oh, yeah, the fact that Paul has no shoes, and the Volkswagen says 28 if, and anyway, this disc jockey started reeling off this stuff, and then a disc jockey outside of Philadelphia picked it up, and then another one, and then it snowballed, and then it got ridiculous, and it got all over the country. If you remember it, it was just an amazing thing, and then new clues kept coming up, and then Paul had to come out and deny it. There was even a television show, believe it or not. I haven't been able to find a copy of it, although I have the audio, but I did watch it when it actually came out. In 1969, RKO Television hired F. Lee Bailey to host a show called Is Paul McCartney Dead? You Decide. And he went through all the clues, and he called witnesses like James Taylor, who at the time was on Apple Records, and he called in Alan Klein, who was the former manager of the Beatles, and he treated it like a trial. And he presented all the evidence, and he asked the audience at the end to decide whether the story of Paul is dead or not. And for some reason, that half-hour TV special has been lost. I even went to the Broadcasting Museum in New York, and they have it on their list of top 10 must-find shows that they don't have. But I remember watching it, and I was, riveted when I saw it. But yeah, that thing was huge. If you were around during '69 when that happened, you remember it. But you tell people about it now, and they go, "Yeah, I've heard about that, but what was that all about?"
Well, the best clue for me was playing Revolution 9 backwards and having it say, "Turn me on, dead man." That was good, because it really does say that. And you can't figure out how it would say that from number nine. It just, do you know what I mean? The sound wouldn't be the same thing.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, and there's a few others like that, too, like the I Buried Paul. Well, John was saying, I buried Paul because I played the guitar too heavily and I buried Paul's bass. I mean, there's explanations for most of them when you come right down to it. But there's a couple that are just, they can go either way. So you can't really disprove it or prove it. But, of course, the whole thing was all coincidence. And the Beatles certainly didn't plan it. You couldn't plan it. But if you remember, when that happened, all the Beatle albums went back on the Billboard charts immediately. And they sold millions and millions of records, in addition to making Abbey Road, at the time, the best-selling Beatles album.
Well, the one thing I have to give credit to Apple Records and probably Sony is the way that they have kept the Beatles' music coming and coming and coming, and repackaging and this and new things. And I mean, it goes on and on. I can remember when the Beatles came out first on CD. And so you had to go get all the CDs. And then a lot of music purists thought that they sounded like crap because it was too sterilized. The digital mixes, they just were wrong, on so many levels. So then they went back to vinyl, and they had to re-release, and then all the box sets are coming out now.
And then they did the American albums, too. They did a series of CDs of just the American, because the American albums were different than the British albums, so your audience knows.
Yeah.
In England, you would put out an album that would have 14 tracks on it, and you would never put the single on it, because you felt that people shouldn't have to pay twice. Whereas in this country, albums never really had more than 10 or 12 cuts, and you always put the single on it. So that's how, in America, all of a sudden, there's 16 Beatle albums out. Beatles 65, Beatles 6, Something New, because they had all these leftover tracks, and they just kept making up albums to put out. And that wasn't the case. And it wasn't until, it wasn't until Sgt. Pepper that the Beatles albums became unified. In other words, they were put out exactly the same in every territory. Before that, even, Revolver, Rubber Soul, different track listings on all those albums.
There's quite a few albums that were put out in America that don't exist on the British side, like the Hey Jude album, which was just a collection of old singles going all the way back to like 1963 or something. I don't know. I prefer the Parlophone releases myself, but, to each his own. I mean, some people, you know what?
It depends on your age. If you grew up getting, Meet the Beatles, which never even came. There was no Meet the Beatles in the UK. It was called With the Beatles, and it was the Beatles' second album. But in this country, we all, saw them in Ed Sullivan, and we were into Meet the Beatles, and that's the album that we remember. So I'm partial to the American ones. When the American albums were released on CD, I went out and got them too, because that's the way I remember hearing the Beatles. I mean, I was 10 years old when they came out on the Ed Sullivan Show, but still, that's the way I remember them, and that's the way I wanted to hear them.
You've got interviews in this book from the Rolling Stones, Sting. I'm just reading this off. Billy Joel, the Eagles, Steven Tyler. Out of all of those people, give me one that you thought had a really poignant or a memorable thing to say about the Beatles.
Well, I'll tell you a story that I like to tell because I still, to this day, when I do, and I still do interviews with people, I still collect Beatles stories. So that's sort of like hinting that there could be a volume 2. But about a year and a half ago, I was in New York at Electric Lady Studios, which is Jimi Hendrix's studio, for a press conference with Santana and the Isley Brothers because they had just released an album together. And I interviewed Carlos, and then they said, hey, you can interview the Isley Brothers, because the connection there is the Isley Brothers did the original version of Twist and Shout. And they also did a song called Shout. Both those songs, the Beatles later did. Shout appears on the BBC tapes. And, of course, Twist and Shout was one of the songs they sang on the Ed Sullivan Show, and a lot of people associate. In fact, they think it's a Beatles song, but it's not. It's a song that the Isley Brothers did. And anyway, so I'm sitting there, and I'm asking the Isley Brothers about, when they saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, what did they think? Because a lot of groups, when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, a lot of the groups, and that started the whole British invasion, a lot of groups, or people like the Bobby Rydells of the world and the Frankie Avalons, and the people who were the hit makers back then, all went, uh-oh, it's over. Here's this group from England. They write their own songs. They play their own instruments. This is going to be a killer for us. I don't know what we're going to do because we rely on other people. That whole thing was going on. So I said to him, well, you were already established. I said, well, weren't you feeling some pressure that, hey, we're going to have to do something now because now this whole British invasion thing is going to change everything. And Ron Isley said to me, well, it's funny. We heard from friends of ours who thought the same thing, but we didn't have that problem because at the time, now I knew this, a lot of people don't know this, but it is out there. It's not a secret. Jimi Hendrix was in the Isley Brothers for a period of 6 months. He was their guitar player.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Before he was Jimi Hendrix, really. But anyway, when he was just coming up, and he was still, I think, using the name Jimmy James, but he had played with Little Richard's band, and then he was with the Isley Brothers. He played with a number of R&B bands. Anyway, so Ron Isley goes, well, we thought that, but we knew that we had something different. We had the greatest guitar player, so we didn't have anything to worry about. And I even turned, we were watching Ed Sullivan in the living room, and I turned to Jimmy, and I said, Jimmy, what do you think? And I said, wait, whoa, did you just say you turned, in other words, Jimi Hendrix was in your living room watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan? And he goes, yeah, he was in our band at the time. We were sitting on the couch, all watching the Beatles, and I thought, this is the greatest story. I've never heard this one. So that sort of threw me for a loop, and that's in the book. I thought that was, what a great story. Jimi Hendrix watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan when he's in the Isley Brothers. That
is a great story. And then the sort of follow-up story was that he opened with Sgt. Pepper on the Sunday when the...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was a good story as well.
But these are the kind of stories that are in this book, and several of them I've not seen anywhere else. So, and I know for a fact, 99%, that these stories are all true because I got them firsthand. But yeah, that's what basically the book is, all these great stories. It's one of my more favorite stories. Another one is the Billy Joel story, where Billy said he used to see John Lennon. This is when Billy was living in Cold Spring Harbor in New York. And he heard and he saw John Lennon used to like to row a boat. And he always wanted to, he was hoping he could run into John Lennon somewhere because he always wanted to meet him. And after John died, he ran into somebody that worked for John who said, John used to have this rowboat. He used to row by your place in Cold Spring Harbor. And every once in a while he'd go, hey, I wonder what Billy Joel would think if I, rode up to his house to say hello. And Billy goes, I can't even imagine that he even knew who I was. So that really thrilled him. And he likes telling that story.
So Billy obviously never got to meet John then?
No, never got to meet John.
Oh, that's too bad. The last one I want to ask you about, then we got to wrap this up, is Brian Wilson. Because I know there's been a lot of comparison between the Beatles and the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys were one that were actually writing all their own material.
Yes.
Did Brian Wilson ever feel threatened by the Beatles? Did the Beach Boys feel threatened by the Beatles? Because their music was so different. It's almost like there would be enough room for both of them, you know?
Yeah, well, the story in the book is true. Brian Wilson said when Paul McCartney has also verified this, when the Beatles heard Pet Sounds, they thought, "Oh my God, this is the greatest album we've got to. What are we going to do?"
Right.
Brian Wilson heard Revolver and came out with Pet Sounds. The Beatles heard Pet Sounds and came out with Sgt. Pepper. Yes, that is an absolutely true story.
And I think Rubber Soul played in there somewhere too. I think.
Yeah, I'm sure it went back and forth because you're right. The Beach Boys were one of the few bands, but remember, even the Beach Boys on their early albums were doing Chuck Berry's covers. They weren't writing their own stuff in the beginning either.
The
Surfing USA and Back in the USA, and they did a lot of cover songs on their first couple albums.
Well, the Beatles stopped doing covers by the time they hit, what was it, Help, I think?
They actually, I don't think there's a single cover song on with the Beatles. I think the first one, P.S. Please Please Me, and Beatles for Sale had lots of covers. But I don't recall if there might have been one cover song on with the Beatles, but no, the Beatles had stopped doing covers except for an occasional tune here and there.
Yeah. By
the time they were working on the second or third album.
Okay, because I do remember like that song "Act Naturally" that Ringo did. That was a cover. I think.
Yeah.
But
the only reason that they did that was a Ringo song. Every time the Beatles would do a record, they would always go, "Okay, we have to have a Ringo song." So we either write a song for Ringo, like Boy, or like I Want to Be Your Man, which was nothing more than a rewrite of I Want to Hold Your Hand, just so Ringo had a song to sing. And then when they figured, well, instead of writing something for Ringo, there's this great Buck Owens song. And Ringo was a big country music fan. He loved Buck Owens. So they said, all right, let's cut this song so Ringo has something to sing. That's really how that came about.
The funny story about I Want to Be Your Man, which I'm sure you know, is that Lennon and McCartney wrote that for the Stones, and that was their first hit.
Yeah, that's in the book. Bill Wyman tells that story. Yeah, absolutely true.
Yeah, it is sort of a throwaway song, but it's amazing that the Stones got a hit out of it, a number one. For just, well, their interpretation of it was good. It certainly sounds different than the Ringo version of it. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Denny, we got to wrap this up. Thanks so much for coming on. Your book is called A Walk Down Abbey Road, and it's available Amazon and probably everywhere else. Your website is
DennySomach.com, and they can contact me through there, and I'm happy to respond to anything that anybody sends in. Yeah, I got to tell you, though, because of the way things are right now, I think the physical books may have a wait until they get to stores. So I encourage people to go to Amazon and order it. First of all, it's probably cheaper there than the bookstore, but the physical copies are not going to be out there for a while.
Is there an ebook version of it?
Yes, there is, and that's out right now too. You can there's a Kindle version and there's an ebook version. Yes.
Okay, super. Well, thanks so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for sharing all your wonderful stories, and best of luck with the book. I'm sure this book's going to be a killer because I think every Beatle fan will want to get it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Douglas, and it was a lot of fun. And all the best to you and to your listeners.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions, and you're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians, and everyone else, to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. The pledge asks signees to commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows lead to truthfulness, such as clarifying one's opinions and the facts, citing one's sources, and celebrating people who update their beliefs toward the truth. Private citizens who sign the pledge get the benefit of contributing to a more truth-oriented society. Public figures get more substantive rewards for signing the pledge in the form of positive media and public recognition. The pledge crowdsources the truth by asking volunteers to evaluate the statements of public figures who sign the pledge. Take the pledge, Demand that your elected representatives do so, and encourage your friends to take it at protruthpledge.org.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for
is my song Heart's Fire off this album Passions Collide.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Brady Novotny. Hi, Brady. How are you?
Hi, Doug. How are you today? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. You are one of Michael Stover's artists, and we haven't had somebody on through Michael in a while. In the past, we had quite a few of them, but you're a guitar player. Give us a little bit of your backstory. And we've got some of your tracks here. He sent over, I think, the whole album. So we have time for probably one, and we'll use one as the lead-in. But give us your backstory first, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I started playing guitar at the age of 11 and playing my whole life. Started out in classical music and then went to my genre of rock. Started playing electric guitar, and then eventually I wound up playing flamenco music as well, which is more, for some people, the Spanish sound. I played in bands and played and toured and all kinds of stuff throughout my career. And a couple of years ago, I wanted to release my own music, sort of have my own voice out there. So I put together this album called Passions Collide, and the title pretty much sums up what the album's about. It's about my musical passions colliding together in the music, and those passions really are rock, which is my main one, flamenco, and classical.
That's quite a combination of music. I've heard rock and classical put together before, but not flamenco. I don't think that's new for me.
Yeah, sure. What's
unique about flamenco guitar?
It's just the sound of it. Once you hear it, it has a very distinct tone, and it's played on a nylon string guitar versus a steel string. And, it uses various, scales and chord progressions that are very unique to that style. So, when you hear it, you know it. Some people may, sort of give credit to like Carlos Santana or something like that, which he uses it, at times as well. But I tend to get a little bit more, I don't know, I guess the word is traditional with it. And, I've studied some of the flamenco and rumba bands and stuff. So, I just try to incorporate that as best as I could in the music. And so far it's worked.
I had one flamenco guitar player on a long time ago, and he told me that the majority of the music is in 12/4 time. Is that right?
Yeah, there's the traditional one. It's definitely in whatever they call it, subdivided into 12. Yeah,
into 12. Okay, that's got to be crazy. I mean, it's that's very traditional flamenco. I don't usually my songs are in your standard, Western time signatures, and I incorporate the sounds and the techniques into, what time signatures we're used to hearing. So I don't go full into the the 12 and all that stuff. So, but I do use some of the sounds. Well, what's funny about it is that if you think about it, it's fast enough that you could tap dance to it. And with the way
Correct.
that the Spanish dancing with the castanets, and I mean, you'd have to be that fast to get that, because it's almost tap dancing.
Yeah.
When I've watched them dance, it's pretty crazy. There's a name on your bio here that I wanted to bring up. Randy Rhoads. He was a big inspiration for you?
Yes, he was one of my first electric guitar, guys that I've always, he's one who basically introduced me to the sounds and stuff of the electric guitar and classical guitar. So I credit a lot to him.
It's funny because every time I see pictures of Randy Rhoads, I mean, he died very young, which is too bad. But every time I see pictures of him, all I can think of is Michael McKean from Spinal Tap. And I swear that he must have just stolen Randy Rhoads, because he looks exactly like Randy Rhoads. And I mean, the hair, he's just got the whole thing. The only thing was Randy Rhoads, I think, was American, yeah. and
right,
the Spinal Tap, they were British, but he just looked exactly like him. It's like he must have just stolen his look.
Right.
Yeah, Randy Rhoads played with Ozzy for a bit, I think, didn't he? And then
yeah, he his musical contribution was very limited, but the amount of the influence he had on our society and on our world was huge, because he was at the time he was, at the same time Eddie Van Halen was coming out, and Randy Rhoads was a little bit more classically influenced, where Eddie Van Halen was a little bit more blues influenced. So it lent to a little bit more of a heavier sound, what Randy was doing, and that was unique. And that's when so he kind of made it big with when the British heavy metal was kind of hard rock was kind of coming out with Iron Maiden and everything, and he was right there at that time, and just at the right place at the right time, and he had the sound, and he kind of really influenced a lot of the heavy metal hard rock guitar players.
So what have you been doing with your life? Have you been a musician, a professional musician, or have you done other work, or what have you been doing?
I've been everything from obviously professional musician to a music teacher to a worship leader, and also a mental health therapist.
Well, that could be useful in the music industry.
So I have my master's degree in psychology.
Oh, did you say this was your first album?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
First album with my name on it. I played on other people's records, but this is my first album of all my music. Yes.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm dying to listen to it now, because I never listen to the music that Michael sends over, because his artists are always good, and I'd rather listen to it fresh when I have the guest on.
Sure.
But now I'm just curious to listen to something. So pick one from the album, and we'll play it.
Sure. Well, the title track, Passions Collide, is one I put out first. That was the first single, so why not listen to that one?
Okay, this is Passions Collide by Brady Novotny. Wow. A lot of information in that song, yeah? There's all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah.
What came to mind while I was listening to it, ironically enough, was somebody called Jean-Luc Ponty. Do you remember him?
I do.
But he played electric violin, but the music was very similar to what he was doing. You know, but then when the flamingo came in, it just sort of threw it all off into a different place. The other one, the other one reminded me a little bit of Dream Theater, slightly.
Sure. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They're a little bit more progressive, but yeah.
A little bit more, yeah. Well, but Jean-Luc Ponty was considered progressive too, but I don't know, there was something about, maybe it was just the tone of your guitar that almost sounded like a violin. I don't know. It was good. I liked it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, definitely something you could listen to a few times and probably get something different each time you listen to it. Simplicity was not a word I would use to describe that piece at all. You know, there was a lot going on there.
Sure.
Very much so. So, how are you faring with the coronavirus? How are you doing with that?
Oh, it's we're located here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You know, we have to stay inside. My day job is I'm a therapist, so I'm life essential. So I'm still working. So I'm still working, but my wife is not. She had to stay at home. But as far as everything's going, I mean, around here it's pretty, not much activity around here. Not like New York or some of the real big cities. It seems like it's pretty. I hate to say it, or I'm happy to say it. I guess it's fairly calm. So we're just, I think we're on a 2.5 week, sort of lockdown, I guess. But there's cars out and there's people out and stuff. So, a lot of people going for walks and exercise and stuff like that. But I'd be happy to get this all done with. People are itching to get back.
I think we all are. This is pretty much shut down the country.
Where are you from?
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. Okay, yeah. Wow, I saw pictures. That's it's pretty crazy to see an empty Las Vegas.
Yeah, Las Vegas is closed for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
Which is closed, which is pretty unheard of. Do you do your recording at home, or do you have a home studio, or do you?
I have a home studio, but I when I record for the album, I went into a studio. I figured, I might as well get somebody who really knows what they're doing versus, me trying to fiddle with knobs. So, I went into a real studio there.
Okay. Who's playing the drums on that track? Great drumming.
His name's Larry Lefevre. He's just a friend of mine, local guy. Yeah, he did a great job. He really put a lot of time into it. So, he's a great guy and a great drummer, and happy that he played on it.
I always love to hear real drums. I just the computer drums just leave me very cold. I don't know. Call me old school, but I prefer real drums.
Yeah, that's one thing I was really happy with the album. Everything was real. Everything down to the congas. Those weren't programmed or anything. Those were a real percussion player, and if there's a shaker, I had somebody do a shaker. So I for whatever reason, I wanted to use real instruments and real musicians. So and real equipment. Everything, all the guitars were through amps being mic'd versus what they call plugins now and stuff like that. So we did it real traditional.
I'm happy. It just makes the music much more soulful when real people are doing it.
Yeah.
I think computers kind of
absolutely
can sterilize music, and it just doesn't have that soul that I think music needs. Okay. Anything else? You got anything else you want to bring up? You got a website you want to promote?
Yeah, you can find all my stuff on my website, Brady Novotny. It's Novotny. DickyBetts.com, and on there's all the links to all my stuff. I have a YouTube channel where I have some music videos, and I talk about the songs. I kind of give a, little synopsis of each song and what I was thinking when I was writing it and all that stuff. So, so I have a YouTube channel and Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. There's all the links, and of course, if you're interested in the music, and there's links to, purchase it, and of course, I'm on Spotify as well.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it, and thank you for sharing your music. It was very enjoyable. Best of luck. I hope it does well.
All right, thank you very much, and stay healthy there.